Sorella Sand and her glass candle, Obara Sand at High Hermitage, Lady Nym on the Small Council, Tyene Sand with the Sparrows, Qyburn and his monster, Arianna off to meet Aegon, Marwyn off to meet Dany, and Quentyn, his fate a mystery. Doran Martell's pieces seem to be in place for something, but for what? On this long, exhaustive series of videos, I've gone over many details of Doran's scheming and possible scheming, and I've likely gotten a lot wrong. But let's step back from the trees and look at the forest. One of the most important points I've put forward in this series, mostly in part 1, is that the Martells are salty Dornish. That is, they are Royish. And their history matters. Garren, Chroyane, Nymeria, the 10,000 Ships, the Way of the Orphans, Shandystone, the bleak dying land of Dorne, it all matters. And as we discussed in part 5 and 6, Dornish law and real justice matter. After all, and this is important, A Song of Ice and Fire is a story of reoccurrence. Have you ever seen the arms of House Toland of Ghost Hill? He had to think a moment. A dragon eating its own tail? The dragon is time. It has no beginning and no ending, so all things come around again. We have the reawakening of the others and the resurfacing of the children. We have the reversion of the Andals and the reforming of the warrior sons. We have the return of direwolves and the re-independence of the North. We have the Targaryens reclaiming and the revenge of the Blackfyres. We have a retrogression to the old way and a re-establishment of the Kingsmoot. We have the re-emergence of the Faceless Men and a possible resurrection of Azor Ahai. And of course, we have the rebirth of dragons. Thematically, we really know where the Dornish story must go. We know it must be towards Royish restoration. Nearly every other part of our story has circled back. The story requires an earth-shattering attempt for the nut-brown girl to topple the tow-headed boy. But how can Doran possibly hope to restore the Rhoynar? How can he possibly win the Game of Thrones? And he does want to win the Game of Thrones. Now, I discussed in part 5 how, under Dornish law, Arianna might be queen. But such a legal technicality is almost certainly meaningless before tangible things like armies and dragons. The promise of social services under Dornish law may win the small folk over, but House Martell is still massively outgunned. Dorne is the least populous kingdom, and they have long been lying about their military might. Not to mention, much of that military is composed of the less-than-loyal House Ironwood, who do not share their Rhoynar values. And so, for a long time, I held the belief that the Martells really wanted dragons. And this is shown in my original Dornish Master Plan videos. After all, Dorne and Marwyn were researching dragons, and Mirri Maz Duur was at the hatching of dragons, and Marwyn is off to Slaver's Bay to find Dany and her dragons. Oberyn Martell even went around producing sand snakes like he wanted to birth a child with special genes. One of his daughters was even mothered by the blood of old Valyria, and 4 were by Alleria Sand of House Uller. House Uller was rumored to have captured Rhaenys Targaryen the Conqueror, for who knows what. But a couple of things don't fit with the Dornish pursuit of dragons. Doran Martell had the opportunity to secure Dany's dragons. Cahuro Mo could have taken Dany and Karth, and brought her right to Doran or Marwyn, and Quentyn could have been sent quickly to Slaver's Bay as an honored prince, rather than as a late beggar. It seems Doran did want dragons in the world. After all, he claims he wants fire and blood. But we have to consider the idea that he never wanted dragons for Dorne. We have to consider the idea that the Quentyn quest was only an act of feigned loyalty to the Targaryens. But does that even make sense? House Toland has a dragon on its banners. A dragon eating its own tail, aye, from the days of Aegon's conquest. He did not conquer here. Elsewhere he burned his foes, him and his sisters. But here we melted away before them, leaving only stone and sand for them to burn. And round the dragons went, snapping at their tails for want of any other food, till they were tied in knots. So Dorne is the one place in the world where dragons never conquered. In fact, the Dornish were able to kill Rhaenys' dragon Meraxes by shooting it through the eye. And now Marwyn has the book Dragonkin with a color picture of Balerion the Black Dread. I assume the color is for its eyes. The place to kill it. And Doran has Unnatural History, which also talks about killing dragons. Barth says to not shoot them in the mouth, and Marwyn has almost certainly read Blood and Fire, or The Death of Dragons, the title being self-explanatory. The point being, the Dornish, more than anyone else in the world, seem well prepared to defend against dragons in the case of war and kill them. And why would one need to prepare for the defense against dragons if you're the one that has them? You don't really need armor if you're the only one with a sword. And so in this video series, I've come to a new conclusion about the Royish master plan. Dorne doesn't want dragons for himself, he wants dragons for his enemies, so they can kill each other. Of course, this is not really a new plan at all. Dorne has fully admitted that this has been his strategy. That is, to let his enemies kill each other. Until the mountain crushed my brother's skull, no Dornishmen had died in this War of the Five Kings. Tell me, Captain, is that my shame or my glory? Dorne clearly believes that the idea of one's enemies killing each other is glorious. Now, if you're part of the Thousand Worlds book club, this strategy seems very familiar. It's a strategy used in countless other works by George R.R. Martin, such as Men of Greywater Station, and 7 Times Never Kill Man, and Tough Voyaging. And it's not just in the old stuff. The most recent story written by George R.R. Martin that's not in the Ice and Fire universe is called A Night at the Tarn House, and it too is about trying to get enemies to kill each other or themselves. I've dubbed this strategy the kimdissi philosophy, named after the people of Kimdis from Dying of the Light. Kimdissi follow the teachings of a religious leader called the Son of the Dreamer, who preached a creed of physical pacifism and psychological aggression. He taught his followers to resist their enemies with wit instead of force. He preached, remember, your enemy has an enemy. Kimdis has fought no wars, but the world has bloody hands. When Tober and the Vale attacked Wolfheim, the manipulators supplied both sides. When civil war flared on Emerald between the urbanites whose universe is a single building and the disaffected Starseekers who urged a broader horizon, Kimdis was deeply involved, giving the urbanites the means to win conclusively. It is said it was Kimdissi agents who set the Steel Angels and the Altered Men of Prometheus against each other, who deposed the 4th Cuchulainn of Tara because he refused to trade with them, who interfered on Brack to keep technology stillborn beneath the weight of the Brachy priests. Of course, using wit to set enemies against each other sounds a lot like Littlefinger, and it sounds a lot like Varys, and it sounds a lot like Skahaz with Barristan and Hisdar, and it sounds a lot like the Maesters during the Dance of the Dragons. Is this Doran's strategy, or is he just tooting his own horn for being lazy? Well, we should remember, as Brown Ben Plum kept Dany in Sliver's Bay, Yandri tried to get Aegon to go west. This divorce of the two Valyrian causes is of course serious, and if history does repeat itself like House Tolan's flag claims it does, we should expect to see a second Dance of the Dragons. Having the Valyrians kill each other would be a perfect revenge for the Rhoynar. Remember, your enemy has an enemy. And of course, it was Brown Ben Plum that was obsessed with having riderless dragons released and utilized in war. This runs the risk that the dragons will be captured and used by other forces. For example, it seems quite likely that the Ironborn will be capturing a dragon, using either a horn or, my guess, their holds filled with pork. That is, Chekhov's bacon. And even beyond the Valyrians, Qyburn, Lancel, and the Sparrow movement have sown massive discord between the Lannisters and the Tyrells. And the Lannisters and themselves, for that matter. But what about the potential Aegon-Dorne alliance? Well, now we're getting into the Winds of Winter. Regarding this alliance, let me first say that George R. R. Martin's writing style is to announce a plan to create expectations and then subvert it. In all probability, there will be no Aegon-Dorne alliance. After all, alliances are formed through marriage and familiar relations. While Jon Con is certainly thinking the Dornish will join them, Daemon Sand has been planting the idea that Aegon is a fake in the mind of Arianna. It seems exceedingly unlikely that Dorne will be blindly following Aegon into war based on the abstract idea that he is the son of Elia. And what about marriage? Well, Arianna is about as competent to broker a marriage as Quentyn was. Do we really see the bold feminist Arianna thinking the young, sexist Aegon a proper mate? Would Daemon Sand, who wants to marry Arianna himself, really help facilitate that? It seems unlikely. The most interesting thing about a potential failure of the alliance is that Arianna commands 2 armies in the Boneway and the Prince's Pass. The 2 armies are led by Lord Ironwood and Lord Fowler, and the commands are in code. Dragon means war, while war means wait. Or do they? What if Fowler knows the code but Ironwood doesn't? When Arianna says war, will the Ironwoods attack Aegon, Or will they, in all probability, defect to Aegon? Either way, the Ironwoods would enter into the wars, while the Martells would stay put. Does Dorne want to rid himself of the Ironwoods? Meanwhile, we have Tyene and Lady Nym in King's Landing. These two women are such unbridled Lannister haters that they can be counted on to do nothing but create chaos. Meanwhile, the equally unstable Obara Sand is leading Balon Swan to kill Darkstar. What will happen when a Kingsguard, an agent of a Lannister government that loses more and more legitimacy daily, attacks the House Danes? Will these non-Rhoynar houses also enter the war? Whatever Dorne is planning, one thing is clear. His pieces are nowhere near the salty Dornish. Sorella and the Brave Companions are in Old Town. Obara is at High Hermitage with House Dane, a First Men house. Arianna is at Storm's End, commanding House Ironwood, an Andal house. Lady Nym and Tyene are in King's Landing. The Rhoynar themselves are pretty far from the action. But this does leave one final piece. Marwyn. Will he be bringing dragons back to Dorne or the South? Well, it certainly doesn't seem that way. Let's keep in mind, Marwyn is currently heading to Slaver's Bay with Kohura Mo, the Book Dragonkin, Aemon's body, and perhaps Gilly and Mance's son. Now, perhaps Marwyn needs King's blood and is preparing some spell of some sort, and that's why he needs Mance's son, Aemon's body, and a book about dragons. But let's be a bit more practical. Marwyn comes to Slaver's Bay with Sam and Aemon's stories of the North. Additionally, he has Gilly, who would only be able to speak about what's happening north of the Wall. And quite significantly, Gilly did hear Jorah's father Jeor ask Jorah to join the Watch. And Mance's son is really only useful as a hostage in the North. That is, if Mance or Val return to positions of power among the wildlings. And if you want to get super tinfoily, Marwyn was searching for Aemon's dragon dreams, specifically his brother's dragon dreams. And Daeron did have a dream about Dunk and a dead dragon. Perhaps a white dragon, an ice dragon, a horrible dead dragon resistant to fire? But putting that insanity aside, my point is that Marwyn is arriving with a boat filled with the North story. He is equipped with the ability to convince people to go north, not to Dorne or Old Town. So it seems Dorne is in a fairly good position for Royish restoration. His enemies are killing each other or are on track to kill each other, and it looks like he had a hand in turning them against each other and arming them with dragons, religious zealots, and a giant zombie. He can sit back, wait for them to kill each other, and reign supreme thanks to his restraint and his kimdissi philosophy. And the flag of House Toland screams this plan. Yes, the dragon represents the reoccurrence of time. And yes, the dragon represents the Dornish resistance against the Targaryens. But most importantly, the dragon represents what it is. A dragon killing itself. Now I will say there are a few problems that may come back to haunt Dorne. What if Quentyn survived and actually brings back a dragon? Won't that bring the wrath of Dany? And what if Quentyn sides with the Ironwoods? What if he wants Dorne and feels he deserves it over Arianna? Did Aerys Oakheart switch Myrcella for Rosamund? If Rosamund arrives in King's Landing instead of Myrcella, won't the Lannisters be coming for Dorne? Even if that switch never happened, the Sand Snakes seem to believe that Darkstar is innocent. And let's be honest, Darkstar is definitely innocent. The fact that no one saw the event but Dorne insists it was Darkstar really solidifies that. What happens when the truth finally comes out? And finally, Arya Hota is the Watcher who mindlessly follows Dorne. What would happen if he started having an opinion? And so we come to the end of the Deeper Dorne, which I hope showed how rich the Dornish chapters are and how vast the Royish master plan could be. Essentially, the Royish master plan is an attempt at Royish restoration through the kimdissi philosophy. That is, through physical pacifism and psychological aggression. I believe Doran Martell is much like Littlefinger and Varys, and that the Quentyn quest was so ill-resourced because Doran in fact does not want dragons. He wants to arm his enemies and have them kill each other. And I believe the quest was an act of feigned loyalty to the Valyrian causes to prevent their attacks, but was ultimately empty. Much in the same way that the Dornish were supposedly loyal to the Lannisters during the War of the Five Kings, but supplied no troops. Once again, I'm probably wrong about half of this. I'll be doing a Q&A on the Deeper Dorne, so leave your questions below. I haven't decided on my next series, my Patreon supporters vote on that, but I'll be putting out a few one-shot videos like the Frey Civil War in the meantime. Thanks for watching, and you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter. I'll see you next time.